You've entered Bookstorm. Your favorite authors are here to dive down deep into their best-selling books. Stay tuned to brave the storm.
Welcome back to Bookstorm Podcast, listeners. I'm your co-host, Kristen Civiletto, and with me is Julia Noel Rose. And we're just thrilled you're tuning in from 102 countries or territories, all 50 states. And we know why. It is because we are bringing you the very best authors out there today, and today is no exception. We are extremely excited to welcome acclaimed author ASHLEY REAM. Welcome, ASHLEY.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I love your podcast.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that. We're here to talk about your new book, The Peculiar Gift of July, which I'm going to show this beautiful cover. And we loved this book. We're going to talk all about it. But first, if you'll allow me, I want to talk a little bit about your background. Our listeners love to hear about the authors that are on our show. And you are a former journalist. You're the author of 3 acclaimed novels. One of those, Losing Clementine, not only did it sell at auction, become a Barnes& and Noble debut pick, was shortlisted for the Belcones Fiction Prize, but also I hear it might be being made into a movie. Is that true?
That is the word on the street. I am learning a lot about Hollywood. It is a much more confusing and twisty process than publishing. So it's definitely, it's been quite a ride, but I've heard some very positive things that I'm not allowed to talk about, but fingers crossed.
Okay. Well, we're super excited because I can picture that with this book. As I'm reading it, it is very visual in a really cool way. Now, you've lived all over the country, but you currently live in the big woods outside of Seattle. And
Yes.
and again, this book is atmospheric in a lot of ways, and I can see where you brought that experience into it. So we'll talk about that, of course. But I know Julia first is going to tell us a little bit about the book without giving away spoilers.
Yeah, I won't give away spoilers. And if there's anything that you want to add at the end, Ashley, please do. But in the meantime, I'll just tell our listeners kind of where we're at. So Evie's End is a small town on an island off of the Pacific coast. We meet resident grocer Anita Odom. She's taken over the family grocery from her father, and things are fairly routine until 14-year-old July shows up on her doorstep. Anita was asked to take in the daughter of a recently deceased estranged cousin. She feels ill-prepared to be a parent and absolutely certain that the entire thing is going to end in a disaster for both of them. As the resident grocer, Anita knows a little something about each of her customers' lives. She knows who's celebrating birthdays and when times might be tight. She keeps secrets and she really, really tries to not interfere with any of their lives. But July is different. From the moment she arrives, she does nothing but interfere. She seems to know exactly what customers need, and it's usually small things. A housekeeping magazine here, or a coconut pie to somebody else. And one by one, these gifts start to change these customers' lives of nearly everyone in town. And July, she just is kind of, doing her thing. That's kind of her gift. It's not long before these things start to cause questions to emerge and secrets are exposed, and everyone in Evie's End has to open their hearts a little bit wider to make room for everyone involved. Did you have anything that you wanted to add?
I would like for you to just travel with me and so that you can give the elevator pitch because you do it better than I do.
It's awesome.
That is so funny. Well, I will dive into my first discussion topic with you. Evie's End is a unique place in that it's very isolated and it's somewhat self-sufficient, kind of like its inhabitants. They all live very, I would say, I wouldn't go with cliquey, but very like grouped lives almost. Everyone kind of respects each other's space. And like I said, self-sufficient until they need somebody. And everyone needs somebody at some point. So we see Pastor Chet needs somebody and several others. People were there for him during some dark times. And I was hoping that you could talk about the role of community in the book and, with everyone's different circumstances, but especially during crisis.
This is maybe my favorite part of the book. A lot of early readers have said, oh, we just love Evie's end. It's so charming. We just like being there. I think what they're really telling me though, because yes, it's charming. It's on an island. Who doesn't like that? But I think it's really about the people who make up Evie's end that they're really talking about. It's Tiny at the bakery, and it's Jim at the library who takes care of his sister, and it's Anita at the grocery store, and it's Mac and the old philosophers meeting over coffee and pie. I, th- it's there's a tightness there that feels to me a little bit like family more than like a town. It's so small and so tight knit. And what you were saying about always needing people, I think that that's really true. And not only that, what's important to me about this book is how when there is friction, and there is for sure, Gordy and his chicken situation, if nothing else, but there is a necessity of repair that I really loved writing about. Because, when you live in such a small place, you are going to see that person tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. And your kid is going to be in school with their kid, and your spouse is going to run into them at the store. And there's this idea of like ghosting and things that we sort of see in modern society, or maybe it's just a friend that now you only text, but then the texts start to fall off. Like there isn't that in this community. And so people are in each other's lives for the better, for the worse, for the long haul. And I think that we miss that in our modern lives, a lot of us. And so to be able to go into a book and to kind of find a little bit of that nostalgia, of that maybe lost sense of community, I think that's what people are responding to. I really think that when they say they like Evie's End, that they're not really talking about I like Main Street. I think what they're saying is I like the people, I like the community, I like that feeling that it gives me.
I absolutely love the phrase you just used, the necessity of repair.
Mhm.
I love that. It really gets down to like a root of a value of community and kind of having that relationship building and the permanency of people around you and how important that is to everybody. And you're right, in cities we have this sort of anonymity and we tend to care less, we're not as nice, and we're never going to see him again. Why does it matter? And here you are with the same, 1,000 people and you have to it's a different world. So I really love that.
I think if there's one value that everyone in EB's End believes in, it's second chances. And I think you see that again and again in the book. No one is cast out, even when you've got people who are very, very different from each other. They have very, very different identities and beliefs. They, there is a place for everyone there, and they find it and they make it work. And even when it means trying over and over and over again, which I think is something that I think a lot of us want for ourselves. We want to know that if we mess up, we can start over in some way. And the thing about that I liked writing about the relationships, as you were talking about, that all the little changes that start to happen that snowball from July's gifts, it's that these these changes require people to forgive and to move on and to have these relationships take different forms and to readjust their lives for one another. And that just ripples out and out and out. So when it starts as these really small things that you were talking about, this coconut cream pie or this housekeeping magazine, we kind of see how it changes not only the person's life that they give it to, but the people around them and all of these ripples. And that was a really exciting thing to get to explore.
I love that you used the word cast off because we're talking about an island, but it was one way in which the natural world mirrored what was going on with the inhabitants. So I thought that was kind of cool. And by the way, I am one of those people who grew up in a small town and then moved to Atlanta, not a small town. And I looked back on the small town with a lot of nostalgia because, you remember things nicer than what they were, of course, but it was because of the people. And I'm not sure they gave people second chances necessarily, but there are other qualities of my small town that, have stayed with me my whole life. So it's very interesting. Well, I want to ask you, I want to go back to something that Julia talked about when she was talking about the background for the book, because we talked about how Anita's a grocer and she was a good observationalist. She saw, the changes people made from week to week or what they were buying. Maybe somebody was in visiting. But July believes that maybe Anita confused knowing things about people with knowing people. And I
Mhm.
wanted to see if you could address that difference in intimacy. And do you think that Anita would agree with July?
I think Anita comes to agree, perhaps against her will. So when the book opens, Anita tells us that she has a theory of groceries. She believes that if she can look in someone's grocery cart, it's as good as reading their diary. She believes that people shop and eat the way that they love, both themselves and other people, that it tells you everything you need to know about their lives. Like you were saying in the introduction, she knows when someone is going to have a baby. She has predicted divorces. She knows when someone's out of town, when someone's hosting Thanksgiving, when someone has been told to watch their cholesterol. She knows all of the things. And just like you were saying, it's only when July shows up that she points out to her a little gently, and then sometimes not so gently, that she has confused knowing facts about people with actually knowing them. Because when July is in her store, which is where she always is, she lives in the shop above it, or she lives in the apartment above the shop. So she can go a week without ever leaving this building. That cash wrap, that check stand is almost like a little bit of a barrier between her and the people on the island. So even though she knows everybody needs groceries, she has customers. She does not have friends.
Yeah.
And she's actually incredibly lonely, but that's not really something that Anita admits to herself. And one thing that I really love in writing is you can show these things if you bring people into the picture that in some way are opposites. So it's not that they're necessarily clashing, but that you can see one person compared to another. So Mac, her dad, who actually is the one who owns the store, but has had a stroke and can no longer run it himself, there's a line in the book that says he would talk to a lamppost if it was new in town. And even though he's had all of these, these struggles with his health, he still gets out every single day and goes to the diner and goes to the bakery and sits with his friends and talks to everybody who walks in the door. And he still comes into the store just to talk to the customers. He is so very different from Anita. And it's interesting. And it's only when July comes into her life, as children have a tendency to do, they will call you on your nonsense. And it's only when July comes in and really points out to Anita what she's doing that Anita is kind of forced to face this about herself and to decide then what she's going to do about it, if she's going to do something about it. Now, of course, July has her own opinions. And, as she has her little gift, there are a little bit of shoves here and there. Um, July knows what she's doing.
I was thinking about your book when I went to the same store this week 4 times. And I was thinking, what are they thinking about me? I'm disorganized. I've forgotten 10 things. But it also made me think about our digital footprints and how much can be gleaned from that, also without intimacy, right? They can know us, but not know people. So that's a pretty interesting little theme running through your story.
It is. It is. And I think I would certainly rather have Anita know me than to have a nameless computer AI know me. But honestly, it's something I started thinking about going to the grocery store because I
I
would
have.
go with my kid at the same time on the same day
Yeah.
every week. And we would have the same person who would check us out. And she got to know me and my kid. And pretty soon she had little presents waiting for my daughter. And we would talk every day when we were, I was checking out, and we got to know each other over the course of, hundreds of Sundays. And she is one of the people who talked to me about like how grocery stores actually work, so I could at least get part of that a little bit right. Um, but I was standing there and I was watching her check me out, and I'm like, she sees everything as it goes across. And then I started looking behind me, and I'm like, oh, look at the guy behind me. He's a middle-aged guy, but he's the food he's got in his cart kind of looks like what I would expect a teenager to buy if you turn them loose with a credit card. And so I'm starting to think like, oh, I don't know about that. So he probably doesn't have a lot of people in his house with him. But then I look at his hand and he's got a wedding ring. So maybe his wife is out of town. Like I'm doing this whole thing while I'm waiting for our turn. And I was like, gosh, how could it be that someone who does this every single day, and particularly in a small community where you see the same people every single day for years, of course she would do this. Of course she would know all of these things. But I don't know the guy behind me in line from Adam. I'm making up a story about him. And that's what Anita's doing. She's making up stories about people rather than getting to know them.
Yeah.
So as it seemed to me that July, while she has a gift of, knowing, what people might need in that moment and does gift them physical material things, she also seems to gift them with this almost like an ability to self-discover. And throughout the book, as we get to know your characters, they're kind of getting to know themselves. And they realize that they have been pretending for a while, some of them for years. Some have gone through the motions of a relationship. Others have just continued in a career business because it was what their family did and they didn't really listen to, themselves and what they needed. They were just kind of following expectations. And July seems to have gifted people with this external worldview almost. This outsider came in and is kind of showing them all these things that they aren't true to themselves, right? And what does it take in life for us that don't have a July to come in and show us the way? What does it take for that realization to dawn? Is it a conflict coming to a head, or a trusted friend, or maybe someone, literally an outsider with a gift?
I mean, don't we all wish that we had a July?
Yes.
Because I think it's really complicated. I mean, life is really complicated. But for a lot of the folks in EB's End, what has happened is that they've made the best possible decision they could at the time, like we all do. And every time we make a choice, we make a choice not to do something else. So a yes to one thing is usually a no to many other things. And we just keep going down this road. It's choice after choice after choice. Yes, and then all the no's fall away, and then the yes, and then all the no's fall away. And we have no way of knowing when we took that first step down that path what we were going to face in 10 years or 20 years in some of these cases. I mean, we talk about Doc and Carol, who I have a real soft spot for that particular couple. And, they're folks in the later part of their middle age, is probably how they would like to put it. Their kids are grown, they've been married for decades. They had no way of knowing when they were in their early 20s and they first started out how things were going to end up. And so not only has that happened, but all of this time on this path, they have children, they have friends, they live in this community that knows them a certain way. It's very hard to deviate at that point. And if you do make a choice to deviate, oh my goodness, all the ripples throughout the community, not just your kids and your spouse, but, the person who knows you at the store, and in Doc's case, he's got all of his patients and everything is happening. And it's so hard even to acknowledge that you might want to do something different, to let alone to like take that step. And so And if you take that step, how do you know it's the right one? Because now this is the first step down a new path, but you're going to do the same thing all over again, all the yeses and the nos, just all over again. So the idea that you could have a July who could come in and who had this gift of knowing what the right next step for you is, I think that's the thing, is that in life there's no one and nothing. We can't know in the way that July knows. That's the magic of the book. That's the magic of July, is that it's wish fulfillment, I think, for all of us, because I certainly have that, and I don't know if you do. I mean, faced with a big choice, or even if it just feels big to you, and what we're just doing the best we can in the moment. And that goes back to what we were talking about before, about second chances and repair and forgiveness, because sometimes even though you did what you thought was right at the time, who knows how it's going to end up, right?
Yeah, very true. Well, this story, in many respects, is an ode to family, the ones we choose and the ones that we are born with, but also to motherhood. And I wanted
Hmm.
to ask you about this a little bit because there was a point where, Anita was concerned that maybe she's not equipped to be a mother or to provide what July might need. But I wanted to ask you, do you think anybody is ever fully prepared or equipped to be a parent?
That is one of my very favorite parts of the book. So there is this wonderful scene, at least I think it's wonderful, where Anita has just gotten word that July is coming. And so she has no idea what to do. She's going down to the store. She's buying like toothpaste and cereal and like 2 bananas. She doesn't know. She's just doing the best she can, and she's running around her apartment. She's sitting in this chair and then sitting in that chair, and she's nuts. She's like a squirrel trapped in a car. And I think that that's basically what preparing for parenthood is for all of us. We are just squirrels trapped in cars. We don't know what we're doing. You can't. And I don't think it really matters if you are a mom who's welcoming a newborn, or if you're someone like Anita who's welcoming a 14-year-old, into your home. Um, it's the same. We don't know what we're doing, and we're making it up as we go along, and we're doing the best that we can. And I think Anita is just being really honest. She has an opportunity, maybe, to be a little more honest than a lot of us would, of like, well, this could be a total disaster.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I certainly had those fears, and I imagine that, all moms do, no matter how you mom or how you came to be a mother.
Yeah.
And I just think that there's universality in that.
Well, I loved that there were certain qualities about Anita that I think helped her along in that journey. And one of them is what you mentioned, that honesty. She was also very humble. She was willing to try something new, figure it out. And even though she was kind of, taking over for her father and living all her life in this small town, she still had that mentality of, okay, let's try something different. Let's figure it out. And that was just a great quality that I saw in her that I think every parent maybe needs to develop.
I was
There is
thinking that
a,
oh, I'm sorry, go right ahead.
I was going to say, there is a scene where she realizes July is not sleeping. And she's like, well, care and feeding. I must see to this. She has no idea what to do, because of course none of us do. But she knows that she herself does not sleep well either. And so she's like, well, if neither of us are gonna sleep, at least we can not sleep together. And so we have this scene where she's like trying to drag this big mattress down this tiny hallway in this tiny little apartment. And July kind of looks out the door of the bathroom. She's like brushing her teeth. She's like, what are you doing? And Nita's like, it's fine. It's totally fine. It is not fine. Nothing is ever fine. But she just drags this mattress into July's room and throws it on the floor. It takes up the whole rest of the room. You can no longer shut the door or get into the closet or do anything. But she lays down next to July. And she's like, I don't know what I'm doing. You don't know what you're doing, but we'll just be here together. And I think that that's 99% of parenting, is like the honesty to be like, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm here. And I think that that attitude actually kind of is in a lot of the other relationships that you see. Like with Jim, the librarian, who has his own kind of loneliness because he's the caretaker for his sister who has a lot of disabilities. And, people are just sort of not bothered. Don't bother Jim. He's got so much to worry about at home, take care of. He's being not bothered into an early grave. And it's when Mac finally reaches out with a little shove from July, of course. And Mac starts to form that relationship with Jim, and he invites him into the circle of his friends. They call themselves the Old Philosophers Club. That it changes Jim's whole life. It probably gives him extra years of life. And it's not anything exceptional Mac did. He just sat down next to him and said, you want to come sit with us? And I think that's really kind of all of it takes. But in this community, and I think maybe in all communities, we need a little someone like July, and it gives you a little shove.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. I also, speaking of July, I was curious, how did you land on her name?
Okay, so there's the story in the story, and then there's the real story. Which one do you want?
All the stories.
Okay, so the story in the story, we'll start there. So July's adopted mom, who is the one who passes before the book opens, she is a professor of ancient history. And so July is a feminine of Julius Caesar. That's where that comes from in the story. But in real life, there is a book called Driftless by David Rhodes. Now, if you don't live in Wisconsin, you may not have heard of this book, but if you live in Wisconsin, everybody has read this book. It's very much a regional touchstone. And for a couple of years, I lived in Wisconsin. We were talking earlier about having lived all over the country, and I lived in Madison, Wisconsin for a couple of years. And I hadn't been there 5 minutes before someone basically just handed me a copy and like, this is the way it goes. This is your ticket. You must read Driftless. And it's a fantastic book. I absolutely recommend it. And there is a character in there called July. And so that was my little wink and nod to my years in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Awesome. I have not heard of the book. I'm going to add it to my list. So I will always take a good recommendation. But that is
Well, I
awesome.
think Julia has a burning question for you.
I do,
A
I do.
burning one.
So I previously I know we talked about the potential for your book to become a movie, and I know you've got some stuff going on in the background. Is there anything upcoming that you're willing to share with our listeners? Maybe something you're working on, something in the works, or anything of that sort?
Well, I'm always working on the next book. So that is something that's definitely coming. What's been interesting as the books have gone on, because like we talked about earlier, this is my third one. The more books I write, the more I have started adding little touches of what I call magic realism. Some other people call it speculative fiction. You choose the word you like. But I'm definitely, the more books I write, the harder I kind of lean on that lever, because I've discovered, much to, I think, my surprise, although probably not to the surprise of folks who have been writing in this way for much longer than I have, the more magic, the more fairy dust that you have, the more that you can put meat on the bones and talk about really kind of difficult things without it feeling difficult for the reader at all. I mean, on one hand, July is a book about a 14-year-old girl who changes people's lives with pie. And that sounds very light, and it can feel that way. It's a really fast read. But it's also a book about loneliness and parental loss and depression and divorce and adultery and all kinds of other things. But it's almost like you don't notice. You're so distracted in the moment by the little sprinkles of magic and the sparkles and the smell of the cardamom floating out of the bakery. And I have definitely had some early readers come to me and say, I sped through this book. It was so much fun. I loved it. I shut it. I was going to go on with my life. And then the next day or the next week, I keep thinking about Pastor Chat and what happened with him and, how he dealt with all of his difficulties. And, I think about tiny in the bakery, and she's in AA, and that's real hard for her. And Anita is trying to learn how to mother this poor orphaned child, and all of these things just sort of bubble under the surface. And I am having the time of my life, more and more learning how to lead on this. So you can definitely expect more magic realism, more speculative fiction as the books go on. I'm
That's
finding
awesome.
my happy place. This is wonderful.
I love
No,
to hear that.
no,
And how you
because it's like,
described that was perfect because as I'm reading it, it really reads like that. It reads like a comfortable, cute island, like community coming together type read. And even as we've been talking, my perspective has been changing. So you took such comfortable ideas and really added this almost philosophical spin on them, and it's making me think. And I think that's the most you could ask for as a writer.
well, you want to do both for your reader. You want to give them both. Like, I have a hard time when people ask me, what kind of books do you write? Because there isn't necessarily a certain genre I can point to. I can't say I write mysteries or I write romance. So I tend to say I write book club books. I write books that you would like to talk to your girlfriends about over a glass of wine. So I want to give you enough that you can talk. You've got something to talk about, but it has to be a good time. I really believe that a good book is a portable exit door. So you can take that book with you, on a long plane ride. If you are sitting in the waiting room at the hospital, waiting on someone's in surgery, something like that. If you're going back home for Thanksgiving and maybe that's an uncomfortable place for you, you can take a book with you. And when you need to be someplace else, when in your soul you need a way out for just a minute, you just need a minute so that you can deal with the things in your life that you need to. That is what books are for. That's what they can do for you. And I very much want to do that for the reader. I want to give them some place that they want to go with people they want to be with, and then make them think a little bit afterwards.
Yeah, that's pretty cool and entertaining all the while. So,
Sure.
uh, first of all, again, we're going to show this cover. What a fantastic book. And we are so thankful that you came on the show to talk about it. There's so much to explore. We didn't even talk about the loneliness, but that's a whole nother aspect and theme running through your story. But I want to tell our listeners how to connect with you, and they can, access the book and your other books, but you have a great website, AHREAM, REAM.com. You have a newsletter where you keep in touch with people. You're on Facebook, you're on Instagram. We're so excited about this possible movie, of course, and we hope you come back in the future. It has been fantastic talking with you, Ashley. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so
All
much.
right. So I know I say this every time, but I can't wait to go back and just kind of read and take things in with this renewed perspective. Again, I say that every time, but it
I
is
know.
so interesting to have the layers built for you. You're reading and there's a story, but now, we're talking with Ashley and she's giving us this background and this inside window on how this community even came together in her head in the first place. And it really makes a difference. So I'm very excited for our listeners to get to dive in here.
Yeah, I agree. And I love this emergence of this. We were talking about magical realism, but it's very subtle. And it's so subtle that it feels completely real and not necessarily magical, but something you're wishing for. So I think that's a pretty cool direction where literature is going, at least this particular genre.
I agree. I agree.
Well, I'm going to tell our listeners about our summer lineup and into fall. We're so excited. We've got incredible authors, just like Ashley, coming on with their stories. We love it. Don Winslow with The Final Score, Lou Burney, Crooks, A Family Portrait, Mariah Blake, They Poisoned the World, Life and Death in the Age of Forever Chemicals, Caroline Fraser with Murderland, Crime and Bloodlust in the Time of Serial Killers, Susan Wiggs, Wayward Girls, which is set in Buffalo, where we are, and Joanne Harris, She has written the prequel to Chocolat called Vienne. Christina Baker Klein and Ann Burt with Please Don't Lie. Isabella Maldonado and Jeffrey Deaver with The Grave Artist. Laura Griffin, Innocence Road. Elma Katzu with Fiend. And several of those authors you're going to recognize because they've been on the show before. They are awesome. We just love having them back. And listeners, please continue to share our socials. We're grateful for you. We've got you all over the place. We love it. And we love these deep conversations about these books that we are enjoying throughout the year. So we want you to stay on the radar with us. We're at bookstormpodcast.com. You can find us on Instagram, on X. We're on YouTube where you can see these authors. And we know why you're tuning in because we are bringing you the very best authors. They're here on Bookstorm Podcast.
All right, go ahead and stop recording.